Hey everyone, this is Felix, and this is the first video of the iLogic for Beginner video series. With this video series, my goal is to take somebody who is completely new to iLogic and get them to be able to write their own scripts on their own. With today's video, what you'll be able to do by the end of it is make a form and be able to adjust an assembly with this form, just like this quick little demonstration. Alright, so that's what you'll be able to do by the end of this video. The first things you need to know before getting to iLogic is just a concept of called smart modeling. And the way you get started with smart modeling, you need to know one thing, and that's parameters. If you haven't already plugged into parameters, you can access the parameters inside Manage, and right here, where's it at? Parameters. Under this Manage tab. And every document has their own parameters. This assembly has their own parameters. This part has their own parameters. I like to have it a hotkey. Whenever I press 2, the parameters show up. And so this is the parameters of this assembly. These are the model parameters. These are user parameters. User parameters are basically parameters you can add. If I want to add another parameter that plays a role in this assembly, let me think of another parameter. Another parameter that may play a role is the motor type. You know, different assemblies uses different motors, so that might be a parameter, and that could be a text parameter. We could have a motor type parameter, and we could do some things. But for right now, I just want to introduce to you guys parameters, and that's the number one I think you need to first learn before getting into iLogic. This part also has parameters. Okay, these are the parameters, the user parameters that I created, and these model parameters are basically anything that whenever I make a sketch and make a dimension, those get created up here on model parameters. There's also reference parameters, stuff that are driven, and then we can also have linked parameters as well. The second thing we need to do before creating our iLogic is to visualize what it is we are trying to do with our iLogic code. So right now, before we get started, what I want to do is be able to control the length of this shell, the width of these spreaders, and the number of these spreaders just by manually just typing something in here. That's my goal right now. So now that I have visualized my goal, I probably had to draw. If it's something complicated, I might have to draw it out and just so I could visualize it better. Now we're able to start writing our code. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is just suppress this one. This is the code that makes this function. So I suppress this. If I make modifications, nothing's going to change just because there's no code to do anything. So when you first get started with iLogic, in order to find your iLogic tab, you must press this plus sign. Once you press this plus sign, these tabs show up, and then iLogic is right there. Right here, you can write rules. These are internal. These stay inside this document. If we have forms, these forms are, they make it user friendly. It gives it like a user interface. These are global forms. So this one is an internal form, so that means that this only exists in this document. If I go to this document, there's no rules and there's no forms. But there is global forms. Global forms are external. They're saved in your C drive. And same thing with external rules. These are external. They are saved in your C drive. And they are these codes can be accessed anywhere throughout your interface, your inventor interface, as long as you're linked to these folders. All right. Now let's get started with our first code. We're going to right-click this empty space, and we're going to press Add Rule. Right here, we could give it a rule. Let's just give this a name called YouTube. All right. So this is our canvas right here, our coding canvas, a blank slate. Now let's mess some stuff up, right? So right here, iLogic provides some very simple, quick and easy to use, what would you call it? Help, I guess. And they kind of guide you through writing the first bits of codes. Over here you have your assembly. This is your assembly right here. You can see your component occurrences right here. You can see your user parameters, your parameters that you defined. You can also see your model parameters. These come with anytime you make a constraint or something, or a sketch and you make dimensions, they show up right here. Right here you can see the files that are inside, file tree, files, some other stuff. We'll get into this later on in future videos. But for now, let's get started with our first code. So remember, going back to what we just talked about, we had to visualize what we wanted to do. What I wanted to do is be able to control the length of this assembly from a form. So the way we do that, let's go under the snippets right here, what iLogic provides. So under parameters, so obviously we want to go to parameters because that's our goal. We want to send parameters. And under parameters, you have these options. You can set a parameter equal to something. But just from experience, I already know what I want to use. What I need to use is this function right here. I'm going to double click it, and I have this function that's only temporary. It's only trying to guide you to your first code. So I'm going to actually remove this. What it's asking for right here, it's asking for you to type a component occurrence. So right here, what I want to modify is this left-hand shell. So I'm going to type left-hand shell, and the parameter that I want to modify is called length, and we saw that name inside that part already, and we want to set it equal to the length of this assembly. So let me explain this for a little bit. So anything on the left, this is what you want to modify, and anything on the right, this is what you're setting it to. So we want to modify this shell, and we want to modify the length, and we want to set it equal to this length that we have in our assembly, this length that we have. So now, if I modify this this number, it's gonna run that rule. So if I type 60, now that changes. However, now but these didn't change. And just notice that because we haven't written the code to change these. If I change this number right here, then those spreaders don't change. Just because, and that shaft doesn't change either, because we haven't written the code. All we have written is this simple line. So now let's modify these flat bars. Those are the long guys right there. So we're gonna set this parameter, that bar. That parameter has a parameter called length. And one thing about smart modeling is that you want to be consistent of the way you do things. And sometimes, you might have a library of files that you don't want to remodel, and it's going to give you a headache. But moving forward, you should kind of set a list of parameters that you like to use. So some people might use length as length like that or something, but you're used to doing this. It's good to have some sort of standard in your company or what project that you're working on. So once I type this, it should update these flat bars as well. Okay, so there we go. We have those flat bars updated. One thing to know. So if I accidentally type this right here, we only know it's a real parameter when it turns blue. If you look at our parameters, this is nothing. So this might actually make this a flat bar break. Yeah, I might make a break. I don't know if I want to do that. What the hell? I'll make a break. It's gonna set it equal to 0. Yep. So it messed up just because this isn't even a parameter. This is like 0. It's nothing. So if I set it back, let's see if hopefully it fixes itself. Damn it. Something went wrong with it. Oh, I think the holes are not. Yeah, they're gone. Dang it. Oh well. We'll fix that later. So if we wanted to update those, you know what? That's kind of bugging me. Let me just open this part up. You know what? I am going to delete this part. I don't want this part anymore. And we're going to remake this model right now. Much better. All right, let's update those spreaders. And so spreader, and the BF is the width of it, and that's equal to BF. Let's also update the drive shaft. Parameter drive shaft BF. And once again, we know we typed it right if it turns blue. So blue means that it exists in this document. It could also be if we type D0 or D1, it turns blue. Yeah, we could see our parameters are here. BF is right there. Once again, it's blue. Alright, so if you type this, it should update the spreaders as well. Oh yeah, so flat bar is not found because we deleted that from our assembly. So that gave us an error right now. So let's get rid of that line of code. Let's run this again, and voila. So if we go to our form, I'm going to teach you how to make this form right now. So if I go back to the form, I type 12 and everything updates nicely. If I type 18, even the drive shaft updates now. Awesome. So that is how we write our first lines of code. And now in order to create a form like this, how we're able to do this, all we have to do is right click and we press add form. Now this, I should pull this up here. Alright, so when you press that button, add form, this shows up. And once again, this only exists in this assembly. So right here, we're able to select the parameters, or select the parameters we want to modify. We can add rules, we can add properties. So if I wanted to modify the length, I could drag and drop here. And basically what you want to make in this form is something that whenever a user uses this assembly, these are the parameters that they should be able to modify. So I want them to be able to modify the length and the chain width. And all I had to do is just drag this over here and drop it. Now I do want to mention something. Let me delete this. Let me delete chain width. In order to allow that form, in order for you to add a parameter into that form, you have to have this checkbox checked, this key column. So I have it unchecked. I have chain width unchecked. The only one I have checked actually is the length. So that's the one. In order to edit, you right click and you press edit. That's the only one that's showing up right here, just because we only have one keyed. So I want to make this keyed, and I'm going to go back and here and edit. Now I can drag and drop this chain width. There's some cool things you can do down here. You can select a so for this form you can what can you do? I already forgot. You can let's export this together. You can modify the font of this, or yeah, you can modify the name of the form. Geez, this would be helpful if I had done my little research beforehand. So you could change the visual style. Yeah, this is a cool one. This is where you can like change how it looks like. Yep. Alright, you guys are engineers. I'm sure you guys love finding and messing with stuff. So go ahead and on your own time, feel free to mess with this stuff. It's actually pretty fun to see what you can do. For this one, what I want to show you is you can make a list just like that, or you can make a radio group. And we're only able to do this because this was a multi-parameter value. All right. On this one, on the length, you can also make stuff like, where is it at? Size limits. I think it's this one right here. Where, nope, it's not it. All right, I will skip this part for you to figure out. But you could mess with some of the way the user selects some of the stuff right here. All right. So that's how you make a form. And now that we made this form, I could select 6, and it's going to shrink it down. Select 12, and then if I type 100, it's going to update it. All right. Now I'm just going to. So that was the very beginning of this code. Obviously, it gets more complicated as you go. But let me add actually the flat bar that I just had. I'm going to make this flat bar with you. So let's make this flat bar. First time we never had it to begin with. I'm just going to make a quick little box, constrain it to the center. Oops, if I can select that center correctly. Wow. I'm going to make this 1.5, and I'm going to make this dimension. Now this dimension is, I want it to be the length. In order to give this a name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click this, and I'm going to go down here where it says dimension properties. Right here, this is where I can type the name. So I want to be consistent. Instead of typing LG for length, I'm going to be consistent on the way I define length on parts. Just because I don't want to question myself what is what's later in the future. So let me save this as as a new file. All right. I'm gonna give this 001 001. That's my file name. All right. I'm gonna go the opposite way. I'm gonna change this thickness. Oh, I don't have that set up yet. Let's say 3/16, and let's make my hole. My hole will be right here. Oops. That will be 1.5. I'm going to make this, I don't care about the diameter of it. And I'm going to pattern this. Now, I'm going to show you something right now. This is leading somewhere. Trust me, this is going somewhere. So I'm going to constrain this. And I'm going to constrain on this spacer right here. Alright. I'm going to give it a mate. I'm not going to add felix to it. I'm getting kind of lazy here. Computer's freezing up. Alright, so, alright. Now it's locked in place. Now, notice how this hole does not line up with that hole, right? We want to be able to, have these holes line up. So, in order to do that, what I'm going to have to do is, send this spacing right here to this one. And I'm also going to have to send the number of spreaders to this guy right here so that we have a clean flat bar. So I'm going to go back and go back to this part. Actually, let me go to the shell first. So I have a parameter here called spreader spacing right here. This is the spacing of this spreader, and I'm just going to copy that so I'm consistent with the way I name my parameters. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go here. So I want this to be called spreader spacing right here. So that is this one right here. I'm going to name this to spreader spacing. And for the number of occurrences, that's called NO spreaders. All right. So now let's write the rules so we can update this guy. Well, first, we have to give it a name. So in order for you to push parameters, in order for you to write something like this, you have to give a name to one of these guys right here. You have to find a way to specify what is what, because how are you going to tell the code that this is a shell and this is a spreader? You have to find a way. One of the easy ways you can do that, you can name it right here. I know some of my engineers, they first didn't really like this. They're like, oh, I like to see the file names like this. Yeah, they like to see that. It makes it kind of difficult for you to write a code without doing this. Yeah, it makes it pretty difficult. So you're just gonna have to tell your designers to suck it up. Yeah, tell them to suck it up. There is other ways, but it just gets complicated. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to rename this to flat bar. All right. And now I can modify the length. Flat bar. Now we also want to set the spreader spacing. So parameter, remember anything on the left is the thing you want to modify. So flat bar spreader spacing. And we're going to set this equal to something else. So this is going to be parameter left hand shell spreader spacing. Now you're probably wondering, why did I type it like this instead of like this? Number one reason is because what this is basically doing is you can only type this when you're inside assembly. If you go back right here, if you look under this, the one we selected, right? The one we selected was this one, and it tells you assembly right there. And what this is basically saying is, so parameter, we want to get a parameter, and this is an assembly because it has this in front of it. So it's saying, look in this component inside your assembly and get this value. Once you get that value from this component, you're going to send it to this component, this flat bar, and that parameter name is also called spreader spacing. That's what that line of code is saying. If I was to do something like, let me just comment this out right here. If It'll also say something like this, spreader spacing. I could actually do this if we had a parameter called spreader spacing inside this assembly, which we don't, and we know that because this is not blue, and we can do this way, but it's just directly to the source. You get the parameter from this shell, and now we also want to get the parameter that bar. No spreaders. We want to get the number of spreaders from the left-hand shell. And we're gonna run this. Oh, spacer spreads. Oops. Spreader spacing. Come on, man. Spreader spacing. Alright, we're gonna hit that update button, and now we have those holes lined up. Voila. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. So let me show you something else. Let's say we didn't want to write it this way. Let's say we didn't want to write it this way. If you have parameters in this assembly that you want to retrieve, so let's say we wanted to get the number, the spreader spacing, and send it to this assembly. Well, first we had to define spreader spacing right here. Spreader spacing. That's equal to 1 inch. This is another way to write this. Write this up here. I don't like using this way. So if I type, so I want to get the parameter spreader spacing from this shell, and I want to place it to this assembly. So I'm not going to write parameter actually. I can actually just write spreader spacing, and notice how it turns blue. So this is the one we want to modify, and we want this to equal to parameter left-hand shell spreader spacing. And once we, if we go to our parameters, we get that parameter right there. Now that's one way to do it. You can also do it this way right here, where it has it, and they have this little snippet right here. If I copy this one, oops, let's double click it. I can also do it this way, spreader spacing, and I'm going to copy this. Oops. Comment this out, and let me change that to something else. Change it to 10. Oops. So it's at 1. So if I run this rule, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to get that parameter. So that's two ways of doing this. Notice how we don't have any like left-hand shell right here, and this is basically saying we're going to modify the assembly. Something like this is saying we're going to modify the flat bar, and we're going to modify this parameter inside that flat bar. So that's two ways of doing this. Now, when things are blue, this has a potential to automatically run. By automatically run, what I mean by that is anytime I change this parameter, this length and this chain width, anytime I modify any of these blue lined or blue colored names, anytime I modify it in the assembly, it's going to run this rule. I can also suppress that. I can change that. If I don't want it to run automatically, I press do not run automatically. So if I press that button, anytime I change the length, it's not going to do anything. Oops. Yep, so it's not changing anything right there. If I don't want that to happen, I can go back here and uncheck that off. It's going to update anytime I change those blue parameters. If I change another parameter like spreader spacing, it's not going to run because yeah. So if I change that parameter, it didn't run just because it's not one of these blue ones. All right. What else can I go over in this video? I guess that's enough for this video. Hopefully it's a good starter for you, but I'm going to go over more stuff in the future series and get more into if and then statements and other ways of doing certain stuff. Make sure you subscribe, like this video, and watch out for the future videos to come. Alright, talk to you guys later.